short delay, but this is going to be amazing. Super excited to be here with Kate Humble, Miriam Lancewood, Ali Saloom, and Gavin Thurston. Please, another round of applause, because it's amazing to have them all over here. And we're going to get right to it. So, Kate, take it away.
Okay. Hello, everybody. This session is a sort of a joint celebration, really, of the wilderness and what it does for you, spending time in wild places. And I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Thinking on My Feet, which is really a celebration of something that is very fundamentally human, which is walking. We are the only species who move about in this particular way. Yes, there are other species that move around on two legs, but no one walks the way that we do. Unfortunately, a lot of us have forgotten how to walk, or the joy that comes from walking, and what it does to us. I think it's quite a sort of primeval thing. That rhythm of putting one foot in front of the other actually does amazing things for our brains. But it also gives us a connection to the world around us that you don't get, I don't think, any other way. So really, this book is a celebration of something that is very simple, that is fundamental to us, and that anybody can do. I thought I'd read you a little chunk. It's written kind of as a diary of a year. I live in Wales, in the west of the UK, which is probably the polar opposite of living in Dubai. Wales is very green and very wet, and Dubai obviously isn't. But I have chosen a piece to read for you today, which was written on the 21st of February. Part of it is from home, in fact, pretty much from my garden. But it also tells the story of a journey that I did in the desert. So I hope that it will appeal to those of you who remember the green, green grass of home, and those of you who love the desert, which I have to say I do too. So, as I say, this was the 21st of February, the year I wrote this. Sorry, that's my phone. That's very embarrassing. I'm just going to sit on that. And the title of this little extract is called Love is in the Air, in brackets, for frogs. There are more indications that spring is thinking about springing. The daffodils are coming into bud. The first purple crocuses are poking through the grass, and there are green shoots pushing up through the leaf litter in the woods. The fields are beginning to look a bit more green and a bit less brown. On our walk this morning, I notice a couple of frogs squashed flat on the track that leads to the cottages on the other side of the hill from us. There are more squashed frogs on the lane. A squashed frog may not be something that any of us would consider being another happy clue that spring is in the air, but that is exactly what it is. Because something is telling the local frogs and toads that they need to hop back to their breeding ponds, the very ponds in which they were born, and get on with the happy business of spawning a new generation. Unfortunately for them, so intent are they on the job in hand that they will stop for nothing, not even the wheels of a passing car. As soon as I get home, I check the little pond that we dug out the first year we moved here. Within just 2 years, despite the fact that we're on top of a hill with no other significant bodies of water in the immediate area, the pond had become home to all 3 species of British newt, as well as frogs, toads, diving beetles, dragonflies, and water boatmen. And this morning, I'm delighted to discover evidence that some of our resident frogs have already made it back and been busy. There is a glutinous mass of frog spawn nestled among the slimy stalks of the marigolds and the water mint. In the afternoon's failing light, which I happily note is now happening closer to 6 p.m. than 5 p.m, I go and feed the sheep and shut the geese and ducks up in their house for the night. They're in an enclosed run, but hungry foxes are clever, looking for gaps in the defences, seizing an opportunity whenever it arises. I was once given 6 adorable Aylesbury ducklings, which would trot around in the field in an orderly line like one of those old-fashioned wooden children's toys that were pulled along by a piece of red string. Their field was enclosed by an electric fence that was on day and night and only turned off when I went into the field to feed them or muck out their house. One afternoon, I forgot to switch the fence back on. The next morning, there were 6 little headless corpses scattered around the grass, a salutary reminder that you can't outfox a fox. As I walk back to the house, Venus is bright in the darkening southwestern sky. It reminds me, as it always does, of an extraordinary journey and the remarkable people I did the journey with. Back in 1999, Ludo, that's my husband, Ludo and I spent 5 weeks traveling with 4 men and their 50 camels over 900 miles through the Sahara Desert. And although we spoke nothing of each other's languages and came from cultures and backgrounds that couldn't have been more different, over the time we spent together, I came to see them as my desert family. It was a brutally hard journey, both for animals and humans, and often we traveled well into the night. There's the common misconception that deserts are vast expanses of monochrome sand, featureless, deadening to the senses. But one of the many things I learned on that journey was that the desert, well, that bit of it in northern Mali anyway, is as endlessly varied as the countryside I live in now, although admittedly less green. It was on this journey that I discovered the joyous, almost hypnotic pleasure of walking, heightened by being in the company of animals and in a landscape that gives the impression that no human has ever passed this way before. It's also where I became aware of the appearance of the first star in the sky, always before it was properly dark, always in the same place, always assuredly bright and twinkly. Rahman, the leader of our little gang, the senior member of our family, who had spent his whole life since he was able to walk making this journey, called it the shepherd's star. For him, it was one of the many natural signposts he used to lead him unerringly through dunes, across gravel plains and strange tussocky grasslands to get to the next well or to a dried-up watercourse that he knew would have food for the camels, and eventually to the salt mines on which their livelihood for the year is based. For me, it became a comforting, familiar presence, an intrinsic part of the natural pattern of the day, like sunrise, and the moment when our shadows had contracted to form an intense, dark pool immediately beneath our feet. The shepherd's star would, for a brief spell, hog the limelight and be the only star visible in the sky. But then, as darkness began to descend over the desert like a cloak, the heavens would reveal the full chorus line, a bewildering array of thousands upon thousands of pinpricks of light. As we traveled on through the night, we would watch the myriad constellations move with stately majesty across the sky, feeling as if we were the sole visitors to the finest planetarium on Earth.
Wow. Definitely sounds a lot better than when I read the book. When I read the book, for sure. But what beautiful language.
Thank you.
I did a little bit of research while I was reading your book, and I found a few statistics. And there's statistics, research that's been done, scientific research, that says that performance actually increases if you are actually doing something in the outdoors. And I've read things like memory is about 20% better.
Yeah.
All the way to problem solving. You can actually problem solve 50% better. And there's been tests. What do you think about that? Is that, do you agree with that?
I 100%
I do
agree
agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've just finished writing another book, and when I was writing this one as well, if you get stuck, I don't know whether you guys felt this, when you can't quite get, like, how am I going to start this next paragraph, or how do I get from this part of a story to the next part? Go for a walk, and you don't really think about it. It's not like you go out thinking, right, I'm going to solve this problem. But there is, like you say, there's something about, I think it's that rhythm that allows you to kind of relax enough that your brain then just seems to work better. It's sort of like anything. It's a bit like, Actually, that's not a brilliant analogy, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's a bit like, when you've got a boyfriend, suddenly lots of men are interested in you. When you haven't got a boyfriend, you can't get one for love nor money. It's a bit like, if you're trying to solve a problem, you're sitting at your desk and you're wrestling with it, you can't solve it. You go out and sort of distract yourself, particularly with nature. I think it is important, the studies that I read, Susan Greenfield did, it was very important that you weren't in a very busy urban space. So if you want to solve a problem, don't go into downtown Dubai, because your brain is more concentrating on not being run over or, getting squashed. But if you're in an area that's a bit more open and that you don't have to concentrate on survival, then you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot of science that says, that very gentle rhythm of walking is very good for brain function generally.
You also talk a lot about how, the educational system would benefit tremendously if things were done outdoors, classes were done outdoors. I read that somewhere as well.
Absolutely. And I think, if you think about it, there is nothing less conducive to learning than being in effectively a cell, 4 white walls.
No, I went to that same school.
But how is that going to stimulate a brain or a conversation or thought? And I did a conference a couple of years ago about outdoor learning. And again, it's one of those hugely frustrating things that human beings seem to know stuff. They know that walking's good for them, but still we sit more than we walk. We know that actually children's minds are stimulated by pretty much anything other than 4 white walls, that learning would be infinitely more valuable done not in that environment, and yet we continue to do it.
Interesting. And maybe this is a question for yourself, Kate, but also we could share with the rest of our guests is, do you talk about how when you walk you don't feel lonely at all, even if you're walking on your own.
Yeah.
And you talk about how you see everything, you feel everything, but yet you're still in your own thoughts as well. Can you talk about that a little bit? And then I'd love to hear from the rest of you guys. What do you do? Are you kind of within your own thoughts, or are you kind of focusing on what's outside?
Well, I think there's something that's talked about a lot in the UK at the moment, but it seems to be a fairly endemic issue in the developed world is loneliness. It's people becoming increasingly isolated. And it's an odd thing, with social media. Everyone thinks that they're connected. I've got loads of friends on Facebook. I've never been on Facebook, so I haven't got any friends on Facebook, but you know what I mean. But actually, loneliness is becoming a really big issue as people lead these much more introspective lives and don't get outside. One of the things that I find about walking, because a lot of people say to me, and I walk anywhere, I went for a walk today here, and a lot of people say, gosh, as a woman on your own, and I mean, you've done some proper extreme walking, but as a woman on your own, people think that you're going to feel quite vulnerable, or you are going to feel quite lonely. And there's a big difference between loneliness, which you don't choose, and solitude, which you do. And for me, walking alone is the great luxury of solitude. I want to be there. I want to be able to experience the world at my pace. I want to be able to look at things. Not everybody enjoys looking at squashed frogs. I happen to like it. So, it is that sort of thing of being able to do things at your own pace. But equally, walking with somebody it brings a different perspective onto a walk. And something that's lovely is walking with people, but a route that you know really well, and then giving their new perspective on a landscape or a view or something that that's really familiar to you, I think.
Interesting. And you guys want to kind of talk about, whether it's where you were, Miriam, or whether it's on your travels.
I think for me, what's interesting about walking is having myself written a book, which I must say was quite a struggle. And I did exactly the same. You know, if you get to a point when you're stuck, okay, you can make a cup of coffee and try and wake yourself up. But actually that walking it's kind of a meditation. It's got a rhythm to it. I think the other thing possibly which is beneficial is actually it gets some blood back into your brain. If you've been sat there, you know, it's like my brain's like a stagnant pond. And actually by stirring it up, it kind of brings it back to life. But no, I agree. I think for me, walking is like a meditation. Without chanting, it's just that rhythm.
It's so interesting you say that. I straight away picture like a 2D cartoon animation of these legs like turning around, and your brain is like working faster and faster. Miriam, Ali, anything you guys want to add to that?
Yeah.
No. Perfect.
I think it depends on the...
You've been to 191 countries, so...
Yeah, I'm trying to fit into this, but I feel, I appreciate the appreciation that Kat is bringing into this and Gavin, but now I see it from a different perspective because I've walked a lot. Since I was young, I've been walking, and we used to go to the desert and just walk and go to school walking, and traveled around the world. As a tourist guide, I do this every day. And if I had one of the seasons that I did, I counted how many steps I've done. But now that I see it from this perspective, I think it is the moment of the wow factor because of the world coming all together into social media. So you've already been to Niagara Falls, you've already seen the beautiful places around the world. So by the time you're there, it's like, it's no longer. So I think it's a factor of being wowed. And that's why I only found myself kind of being surprised of how beautiful this world is when I'm visiting the tribes. And so I do the walk with them. So I would go to see where they actually get their food, how they would go to the hunting, and so on. And that would be more precious to me than just walking, because I can sense the spirituality into what you do. And not to brag about religion or so, every day in the morning, when we have the first call to prayer in the morning, we are more advised to walk towards the mosque and not take our own cars. So we have this thing, for me, it's like natural, because every day I wake up in the morning when I was young, and dad or mom would make sure, and it's a very tough way to wake up, early morning, 4:30 to go to do, and we're so lucky the mosque is very close to our own house, so we're like, one of the lucky ones in the area. So I would walk, and you're supposed to walk in not fast, but you have to walk, and you're saying the prayers all the way to the mosque. So that spirituality part is already exist. And I had to search for something else. So I'm listening to you and I'm like, yeah, that I already have. But now I see it from a different perspective. For me, it was to go to the normal walk with the people in their own presence. But I understand you come from very developed countries and cities. And when you go to the desert, you're like, wow, I'm walking. But we are in the desert. We walk for free.
Fantastic. You also start to see a new phenomenon, which is a lot of people dressed like this and starting to wear sneakers. And that's because we're starting to be a lot more active, and we're integrating into a more active lifestyle. And you'll see that a lot. So whoever came up with that idea, thank you very much. It's amazing to be able to do that every single day. But with that, we'll transfer over to Miriam, and I'll let you, I think if we can
have some
play the
pictures
photos up
behind us
there.
here.
And
So my name is Miriam Lancewood, and I've lived with my husband for 7 years in the wilderness of New Zealand, in the mountains. And we live in a tent. So we, like nomadic people, we put the tent in our pack and we carry our pack to another place in the mountains. Sometimes we stay one night. Sometimes we stay for 3 months. We cook all our food on a fire. And I learned how to hunt with a bow and arrow. And later, after 2 years, I switched to a rifle. So today I would like to tell you what I've learned from the wilderness and what we realized. So I used to be a physical education teacher, and I resigned from my job, and we had this plan of living in the wilderness. And we were quite well prepared with food, minimal food supplies. And we had a friend who dropped us off into this valley, which was 4 days' walk from the nearest road. And the first thing that we realized was, wow, it's fantastic. Aren't we lucky that we're here? We're going to stay for 3 months in that place, right? And the day after, we had ourselves set up with a camp, and we were a little bit busy in the first day. And the next day, there was nothing to do, to sit. And we were like, oh, we might get really bored because there's nothing to do. It took about 2 weeks for the mind to calm down, to be in sync with the rhythm of nature. And in those 2 weeks, I felt quite restless and bored. So I learned that you have to be bored in order to calm down. And all my life, I've been sort of avoiding boredom, right? We're taught that way. So then it felt as though we had no future, which was really strange. It was like one big white wall. That also came because we had said goodbye to our friends and family. We had no communication devices, no machine of any kind, and not even a watch. So we had also given up our past. So suddenly we no past and no future. We felt like we were outside time. And then I realized that right now we are inside time. So maybe some of you are familiar with the word chronos, the Greek expression of time. So not only we know exactly what time it is and what we're going to do next hour, we're also very aware of the days of the week, right, all that time, but also we are identifying ourselves with the past and projecting in the future. So we have a sense of security about this time, right? So suddenly we were outside all this, and we live in what we call kairos, like completely in the moment, which feels eternal. There's no passing time. The days feel like they go on and on and on and on. And of course, we observe the natural rhythms. That's totally different. The sun comes up, down. The winter becomes the spring and the summer, and we observe that. So that was really fascinating. Also, when we go to the city, it only takes 1 day to speed up and to be back in chronos. So to live in the wilderness for years on end is a totally different way of living in your consciousness, not only physical. So another thing we learned quite quickly is that all the animals around us were quite capable of living in the wilderness, but we were struggling greatly because all the animals, they could stand the heat and the cold and the ice, and we were huddling in our little tent. And we're struggling with wet and, horrible. And we had to be around the fire, and we couldn't eat the grass. And so it took a long time for me to learn how to hunt. And we're talking about walking. I learned to use all my senses, because that's what you need with hunting. And I don't really learn it. It's more that all those senses were dormant, so they just come back naturally. Because our ancestors have lived this way, right? It's nothing new, it's all in our blood. Now the hunting, I come from Holland, which is very flat country, very crowded. It's like one big city, really. There's no wilderness at all. And my mother used to be vegetarian, so all of us were, and she never cooked any meat. And when I was in university, I had an opportunity to go on a survival camp. I was quite interested in this, and I wanted to participate until I learned that we had to kill a chicken and eat it. And I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. It's very cruel, and no animal needs to die for me. And so I did something else. So when we went to live in the wilderness, I realized that if we were not going to hunt, we will not survive at all. So obviously, I changed my attitude. But it took a long time to learn how to hunt. And I was failing all the time, in actual fact. So I went out with my bow and arrow, and every time I come back with nothing. So my husband, Peter, is very disappointed all the time. Then one day he said, maybe you should put in a little bit more effort. And I say, okay, today I will get a goat, because in the area were wild goats. And I go with my full quiver, which is 6 arrows. This is a long story, all written in a book. And I finally see a goat. So I'm a little bit panicky and a little bit excited. So I shoot all my 6 arrows on this goat. 2 of them hit the goat, and the 4 were forever lost. They're very expensive, by the way, $20 each. So I calculated this is an expensive goat. And also the goat was wounded, which I found also terrible. So I thought, I've got to get this goat. So I ran after the goat because I tracked down the blood, you know, like a real bushman. I felt pretty cool at the time. And I saw the goat in the riverbed. And he was wounded. And I thought, surely I can outrun this wounded goat. And so I go after him without the bow and arrow because it was useless. I just had a knife. So I run and over those big stones, and then I got tired, so I stopped. I started walking, and then the goat also stopped and started walking. So we sort of running, walking, running together. So we sort of equally obsessed with each other. And so right in the end, he tried to hide in a little cave, and that was my moment to kill the goat. And then finally it died, sort of at my feet. And then I thought, wow, what an amazing, savage thing to do. I've never done anything like this, right? I come from a village in Holland. And I had to carry the goat back to camp. And this was an amazing moment because I thought, wow, I've come such a long way to go from the moral higher ground of, I'm not, you know, I'm one of the better people because no animal dies for me, to this really savage thing. And I'd like to read a couple of lines of what happened when I came back. Peter was sitting beside a small fire when I finally arrived. This is with the goat in my neck, right? Exhausted, I squatted down while he untied the goat and lifted it off my back. We sat around the dancing flames, and I quietly told him every detail of the hunt, while the silver moon rose over the tall mountaintops. I waded into a dark pool in the river to wash all the blood off my body and out of my hair. Looking up at the moon in the clear night sky, I thought of the long chase and killing, and had been very savage. I realized I had become the very person I would have loathed in my youth, when I was a good vegetarian with a higher moral ground. I had come down so far, so to speak, that I was touching the lower ground, the earth. I was just a year earlier that I had explained to my boss in the school, on my last day at the school, how I wanted to live without any barrier between the naked earth and myself. Well, this is it, I thought, surprised. Here I am. There is no barrier anymore.
That is amazing. You know, Miriam killed this goat, and you know, I obviously when you read the book, you ate a lot of rice and you ate a lot of dal until you were able to eat a little bit of meat. So it obviously takes a long time to get to that stage. And you want to tell people what's that around your neck, just to,
So this is the horn of the goat, the first goat that I shot with the bow and arrow. And for me, I carry this with me because it reminds me of the circle of life and death, of which we are all part. You know, we seem to forget that.
Would you say that you had a newfound respect for food, and specifically maybe meat, after having made to do that, to actually hunt?
It's totally different.
Hunt for your own meal, right?
Yeah, and buying meat in the supermarket is totally different from hunting a whole day to get a goat.
Yeah.
But it's so satisfying, and such a feeling of achievement and accomplishment to do that. And so this hunting gave me a kind of confidence, because I learned a skill, right? I can look after myself. I can go with my rifle into the mountains and survive. I know that. And so this gives me a confidence that is not based on comparison with other people. And this confidence gives me like an inner fire. Yeah.
No, it's amazing, and I love that, you know, that you're the hunter. So you have a role to play when you're in the jungle, and Peter has a different role to play. Peter is Miriam's husband. How many people have read the book? Yet. All right, we're going to get some books, and we're going to read. I mean, it's fantastic. But I love the fact that each one of you has a role. But I love the fact that you're the hunter, and if you don't get food, you don't eat.
Peter goes hungry. Yeah, Peter is the cook.
and he's not going to be happy. Well, both of you are not going to be happy. And I can't help but think about, you know, a lesson being over there about the importance of women within the whole ecosystem that we have. You know, that certainly crossed my mind. But at the very least, you know, this whole topic of, you know, equality, when you're out there, everybody's got a role to play. And if you don't combine that role, then you're not going to last very long over there. Right? I mean, you're the one that hunts. Peter is the one that cooks. One of you prepares one of you goes to town and gets food or restock. So there's always a role to play, and I think that's quite important. And I say that because for us, there's this big misconception, and in the UAE, gender equality is quite big, and this is a fantastic, actually, story to kind of share that equality-ness, if there is such a word. So that's just my personal take from that book. I want to share that. I want to ask you a little bit about spiritual beliefs. Mm-hmm. And was there anything that kind of came up from all of this time in the jungle? Or any myths that you came up with? Were there stories that you created that you're going to pass down, and people are going to say, "I heard this thing." That's actually your story. Anything like that?
First of all, we became more and more pragmatic over the years. And we actually had to cast aside all these beliefs. And in the end, we said, actually we're just like walking monkeys. And then, by saying that, some other spiritual experience happened. And one of them, so we don't see anyone for sometimes weeks on end, right? And then one day, a man came, and we, chatted. And then, while he was there, I looked around and I thought, what? Mountains suddenly looked quite sort of dull and a little bit black and white and a little bit depressing. And when the man was gone, Peter said, wow, everything looked so dull and depressing. Wow, that's amazing. So it was as though we were looking through the man's eyes for that single moment. And I think this is happening all the time. We're just not realizing it. So I think our mind is less individual than we think.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I have one last question, and nobody's read the book yet, but does it really cure dandruff?
So we went into the wilderness, of course, with just soap for washing ourselves and washing our hair. And one day I had dandruff, and Peter said, well, we don't have the special shampoo, but he had read somewhere that the Inuit people used to cure dandruff with morning urine, especially the female morning urine. He said, since we have no other option, maybe we should give it a go. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I peed in a little tin, put that over my hair, waited a little bit, and it worked.
So are you going to market this?
Yeah, I don't know if anybody knows Huda Beauty. She's got a beauty line. Maybe this is the next product. But also fantastic highlights, by the way. Yeah. So on to Ali Saloom, and I'll let you take it away.
Wow. Okay. How much time do we have? we have a guest here that I would like him also to have enough time. But let me put it this way. So I did not have anything here. There was a shortage of me. I just came back from south of Saudi Arabia. Was filming there, and it was very, very busy for me. But anyway, my name is Ali Al Saloom. Very honored to be at this great festival. Thanks for having me among these great icons of great journeys around the world. So I'm a student in their own schools. So once again, thanks for having me, and thanks for being here. I have a story where I'm from United Arab Emirates. I've traveled the world, about 191 countries so far. Very blessed to be able to see the world. I've wanted to become an Air Force pilot, but due to a plane crash tragedy in our family, I became the only son of my tribe. So my father decided to obey my mom's guideline by pulling me out of being a pilot. And since then, I've been crying out loud that I really want to fly a plane, and I've never managed to travel. Until one day, Dad said, okay, I'm going to take you with me on journeys. So I started traveling since I was very young, but I never knew that I was going to be traveling for a purpose. So I've traveled with my father over 47 countries. He was a scout and helping other nations and tribes to learn some languages and math. And I've never understood what he did. He was into education. My father got sick with a very bad health condition at that time. In 2009, he passed away. And I was only in my beginning 20s. And It's kind of surprising for a tribal son that I don't have brothers. I've lost my brothers and I've lost my cousins. And I'm the only child of this tribe called Saloom. So here I am between 16 women in my life, which I love them all. Too much drama sometimes. But my father just wanted me to continue to travel. And my mom comes to me and she says, son, your dad left something for you, and I would like to give it to you now. It was 2 years after me coming out of depression. And I loved my father so much. He was everything in my life. And everything I learned in my life, it was because of him. And so he was my hero. And his hero was our beloved Sheikh Zayed, the first president of the country and the founder of this beautiful nation. And so everything he wanted to do was just to translate verses from the Holy Quran, which basically says, "O mankind, I have created you as a man and a woman, and I have made you into tribes and nations, so you get to actually meet and connect each other." And so when you read that Holy Quran verses in the Holy Quran, in Arabic, it's just beautiful. It says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha, wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qaba'ila lita'arafu. And when you read it that way, it is so spiritual that basically it invites every single one of us to travel and connect with the other tribes and the people that are living in different parts of the world. And for me, when I received the box, and inside the box, my mom is giving me some of the belongings of my father, and he said that this is for Ali. I open the box and I see these die cuts of pictures and images of him and me when I was young. And surprisingly, he would say, on the picture, he would say, if you meet the Karamojong people in Uganda, if they still exist, you're very lucky. Go now. Then another page, he would say, I lived with this Polish communist family, but they're so kind. And then a small note, he says, don't believe what they say, negative things about communists. Communists is actually good. You know, it's like weird things. You know, like, I'm like, what is this? I don't understand none of this. Then you would see him saying something like, you know, son, when you go to Indonesia, I know it is the largest amount of Muslims, the biggest number of Muslims actually come from Indonesia, but also it's a land of other many tribes, like the Mentawai people. Maybe you should try their protein meals there. And I still don't know. So I look at my mom and I look at these things and I have no clue. I'm a tourist guide. That's what I do. I take people around my country and think I have the greatest job is just walking and showing people my country. But then I just go home and then I decided to travel. And this happened about 7 years ago. I have already been traveled over 50 countries with Dad. And then I added 140 in about 7 years. And I've created a program called Durub, which stands for Darb, a pathway. And all what I wanted to do was to travel and connect with the people because I wanted to hear from the people. I did not want to hear about them. Now, this is coming from a guy who's actually living in what you refer to, or the world refer to as the Middle East. And until today, I couldn't really figure out which middle are we east of and which east are we middle of. You know, we come from a proper, beautiful nation and region, and I think it's our right that people really recognize who we are and what we are. And I don't want to be copying everybody else in this region because it's so easy to, you know, comment negatively about all of the West world, not really wanting to know about us properly and saying all these negative things about us. And the only thing that is related to Middle East is crisis. But you're here and there is no crisis. It's the safest region in the world and it's very beautiful. But then I realized, is it really the safest place in the world? Is it only the most beautiful place, or is there other places? So here I am, putting everything in my bag, and I started traveling. And I went to Bosnia, and that's where I met the first gypsies. And I learned that the gypsies, you know, where they come from and who they are and what they are. And they're not only good at dancing and singing and what people think of them. And then from there, I was filming it. And as I'm filming, the idea came, why don't I actually document this and create a season after a season from it? So I let go of everything in my life, and I just continued to travel. And by traveling, and this is the story of what I do, People know me from another brand, which is called Ask Ali, and people refer to me with questions related to my country. And then suddenly magic happens. I started learning people from from Holland, and what they think and how they think and who they are and what they are. And fantastically right now, I can connect with Miriam by telling her, you must know Suriname. But many people in the audience might not know what is Suriname. Yeah. And I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but in case you don't know, Suriname is a country in South America. And South America is not all Latinos, no. Some of them are Indonesians, Indians, and Chinese. But they speak Dutch. What is the story? What happened? And it's just unbelievable. So I'm there to connect, to tell the world in Arabic and in English about those people who are living there. And it's a fascinating story of the people who live over there. And then suddenly I'm there in Indonesia following my father, journey of that he did. And I got the protein with the Mentawai people, and they basically eat worms. And I had to dig into this big giant tree, which to them it's equivalent to, guess what? The date, the palm tree in the UAE. And here's the fascinating thing. We look at the trunk of a palm tree that basically gives us the most indigenous, authentic fruit to us, and natural sugar, which is the date. We found this little, about this size insect, and we call it umsus. And this one we kill because it destroys the tree, so there will be no good dates. But in another part of the world, they cut the trunk. They don't want the dates, so they can let that little mommy insect to go inside and lay her own eggs. So here I am trying the best out of different two words, an extreme. So today I was at my mom in Sharjah. I was having my lunch there, and she says, son, I'm so in this dilemma. And I'm like, why? She says, last time we cut the tree, we cut the palm, and your father passed away after that. And I said, what does that mean? She said, don't you know, if you cut the palm, one person from the family dies. I'm like, where do you bring this from? Is this a superstition of the UAE? She says, yeah, in some traditions, you don't cut a palm tree. And I'm like, Mom, cut it. It has all of these little worms. I want to eat some worms. She's like, so my point is, I've been traveling and seeing so much, and you can go online and you can watch it on Duroob, D-U-R-O-O-B, or my social media on Ask Ali Official. And so my journey has strengthened when I started learning about the people. So today, if somebody ask me any question, I dare you to ask me any question that would offend me. I'm so open to any question about our own country, religion. I'm so happy to get any question. Why? Because most likely I've been to your country, and I love and I appreciate where you come from so much that I would show you my respect to you by answering in a way that it would fit you perfectly. For a Bedouin person to make an expatriate laugh, that's a huge achievement, by the way. So, I feel that the only way we can achieve this, if we really open up and not live inside these little cubics. I know that we are getting ready for the future with another 50 years of preparation in our own nation here. But you have to know that our ancestors lived in the desert, and they crossed all over this region without no borders. We did not put these borders. These borders came from the West world against us. And so it's like now we are coming back again, trying to actually connect. But I don't want to keep that connection be only with my people. We're opening hearts and arms to actually connect with you and get to know you better. And that's why I have this show.
Fantastic. It's 6 seasons or 7 seasons?
Yeah,
Seventh is on its way, right?
Yeah, so
seventh is on its way.
I'm in my 7th season now.
Yeah, it's a fantastic show.
Thank you,
It's
sir.
a fantastic show. And I know Ali from way back when he was, right? He was that tour guide that we all went to. But I want to ask you, all this travel, what kind of impact has that had on your thoughts and on your personal beliefs and your life over here? Any specific lessons you want to share with us?
Yeah, I think this might not make many people happy in many parts of the world, maybe especially our own region. But I'm now 41 years old, and I have 4 children. When I started all my journey, I had only 1 child. Suddenly I have 4. I have no idea how, but anyway. I think the minute I you know, because of my love to my country and my duty as a guide who's trying to reveal all the proper information to people who thought that we marry 4 women and then we say we wish, but we don't really marry 4 women. And because, you know, we do this. You know, I'm trying to tell everybody about who we are and what we are. And don't think of us wrong. No, we're not terrorists. No, we are not like this. The religion of Islam is not that. And then I realized that, you know, maybe the problem, Payman, maybe because we are here. Maybe if I go overseas, maybe people don't see that way. And truth is, no indigenous tribe I've met in the world. I've met, my PhD is on tribes. And I did 73 tribes. Out of them, 25 extended, already done. There's not. Telopanos in Honduras was the last one. And it's devastating. None one of them don't believe in polygamy. All of them have polygamy. A man can marry more than one wife, right? So when I go there, I come from a region that have to defend the idea why we can marry more than one woman, up to 4, right? When I go there, I get into the indigenous people in Europe, in Asia, in Latin America, in all these places. I don't need to justify why we have the things that we do. And so I started seeing myself so much with the indigenous people. It's almost like saying, we are indigenous, and that's how it should be. But we lost the connection, so we need to connect. So the biggest lesson I've learned is that we're running so fast in this part of the world. Not only the UAE, I'm talking about the region. We're trying to run so quickly, so fast. You know, trains, planes, big events, and running, and it's hot, and we are inside air conditions, and that's all bang, 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 bang. And we've lost that connection of what we already have so much of, which is the desert. Now, I'm not saying that we have to go back to the camel, because it took us a while from camels to Cadillac. But my point is that, you know, I think the biggest lesson is that the world, and I'm sorry to say this if you disagree with me, but don't believe anybody who tells you that the world is small. Or if somebody says to you that this is a global little village on your phone. It's not. If there is any good thing that you should do to yourself, please believe. Doesn't matter if the world is round or flat. Travel, connect with people, because I swear to God, and I guarantee you, you would hear things that would literally change your life, because you've been there and you've seen people and you've sat with them and you smell the air that they're smelling and you've lived with them. And I have so much belief in my own spiritual side, along with my religion, Islam, that I feel that we have it all, but unfortunately we're damaging it in a way. Yeah. So this is music to my ear, that people are still connecting and traveling and fascinating in every single, you know, one of the icons are doing. And it's an invitation for everybody. Yes, we're doing shows and we're showing you the content, but that doesn't mean that don't travel. Yeah. You know, you gotta go and you gotta do those steps and you gotta go and do these things along with the jungle and the hunt. And I'm gonna hear now more about Gavin. But the point is, when you connect, do you have an opinion, or you're going to actually accept the differences as other people? Because what makes this region so unique, you have to know, this is the place which has the 3 religions that many of the world people are worshiping: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And believe me, they lived in harmony and happily ever after. We've never had issues, whether it was between the Palestine issue, whether it was between this region. In this part of the world, we had monasteries. So there is no any fights that we have here. So, biggest lesson, world is not small. Yeah. The world is very big. And you're so lucky if you manage to travel a lot. So my advice to you, continue to travel. I wish and I pray that God will give me the strength that I could have my journey with my children as my father when he took me with him on this 50, and I can go more with them.
Great.
And I guess it's a perfect time to also share a very important Bedouin proverb that says, you know, when you break bread with somebody, they no longer become your enemy. So,
absolutely.
You know, break bread, travel. Gavin, on to you.
Right.
And my God,
I'm going to mix it
what
up
a life
bit.
you've had.
I've got a toy to help me. But I've just realised, hopefully you don't think me rude if I've got my back to you slightly, or at least hiding behind you. Just give me 2 ticks. What's my password? No, I've got it. I've got it. So hopefully, if I push this button,
There you go.
look at that for magic. So I've been a wildlife cameraman for over 30 years now. I've been very fortunate to travel the globe. I've been from the North Pole to the South Pole, and most places in between. I've worked on all 7 continents. In fact, I think I've seen more of Earth's wonders than anybody has a right to do. See if I can get this clicking right. So a life-changing trip for me was in oh, there we go, it's working. A life-changing trip for me was in 1999 when I was offered the chance to go and make a film about western lowland gorillas in Central Africa. The first trip was going to be to the Republic of Congo. Wow. And to me, the word Congo conjures up images of kind of a dark, threatening place. I remember my grandmother telling me when I was a young boy about the early explorers that went there. So there was Speke and Livingstone and other names I can't remember. But she told me the horrors of how many people went out there and how few came back. You know, they were hit with disease or murdered by natives or whatever the stories were, drowned in rapids or whatever. But I accepted it because I wanted to go and see these guys. It took us 6 days to get to location. Go on, there we go. 6 days to get to locations. We traveled from Bristol to London, then we flew from London to Paris, Paris to Libreville in Gabon. From Gabon, we got into a charter plane, flew over what seemed like endless forest. It looks like the broccoli counter in Tesco's or Sainsbury's or whatever the equivalent is here. And when you land, go on. It's amazing that people just seem to come out of the forest and you're welcomed. And they come out to see who you are, what you're bringing. It's not every day that a plane lands on your playing field. We then switched to car, and when we went to get the car, I saw this poster. Ebola. I'm sure you all know what Ebola is. It's a pretty nasty virus that makes you bleed from every orifice, and you don't last very long. My granny never actually told me about that, but maybe that is one of the things that took out some of the early explorers. Then, even before... Oh, come on. There we go. We then switched to a vehicle. Sorry, it's a bit stuttery. This is actually one of the main roads that goes between Gabon and Congo, believe it or not. And I don't know whether this guy actually ever had a driving lesson. It was pretty terrifying. He sort of hurtled along these roads. They all seemed very happy in the car, but Ralph and I didn't necessarily agree with their driving style. The tragic thing was actually that 2 weeks after we did that journey, that guy rolled that car and killed himself and the head of the national park. So, although it seemed funny at the time, I say he was totally oblivious to the dangers of driving fast. We then switched to a boat and travelled up the Mbili River for 2 days. And en route, that gave me a bit of time to catch up on some light reading. Oh. And now we've lost the picture completely. Oh, there we go. This is going to be quite an entertaining talk. So we had time to catch on a bit of light reading. And then the last bit of the journey was actually on foot, where we went onto the animal paths, namely the elephant paths that went through the forest. Because the forest is so thick that if you want to push your way through, you'd either have to do it by swashbuckling like they used to in the old days with a machete in the old films, or, as I say, you follow the elephant paths. But walking along those paths, of course, you came across the reminders of what actually lives there. Paths of elephant dung, buffalo, leopard, the old snake skin, you name it. And at this point is when I started to feel more vulnerable, and it reminded me of what my granny was saying, and why did all those early explorers die? Most of the forest, most of the view looks like this. If you're looking down the path, I'd either see the back of the trackers, which were the local Bayaka pygmies. The Bayaka pygmies used to hunt in this forest, just as Miriam did, so they would go out and hunt stuff to be able to eat. They've now turned those hunting skills into tracking skills for scientists and film crews. But once the forest started to look like this is when I actually got more nervous, because all I can see is just leaves, twigs, branches, and so on. But knowing that just behind that could be an elephant that's going to flatten you, again, just made me more wary. But what was really interesting while we're out there, of course, the Bayaka are looking for signs of gorilla that we were tracking. But en route, we'd be hiking through there, and then they would stop, and they would point. Wazo. like this, bird. And you'd look where they were pointing, and all I could see was just leaves and branches. And then the next day they'd say, oh, look, a buffalo, a buffle. And I would look, and I would kind of nod and agree and say, oh, yeah, no, thanks. I couldn't see anything at all. And I was thinking, clearly they were seeing these animals, but I don't know how they did it. But after about 2 or 3 days of spending time in this forest, it was almost like a miracle. My brain suddenly, instead of seeing this chaos, when we next stopped and they said, voila, elephant, and they pointed. And I looked where they were pointing, and through this gap in the leaves and the branches and twigs, I could see the eye of an elephant. And then about 2 foot behind that, I could see the edge of its ear. And then about 6 or 7 feet behind that, I could see the twitch of a tail. And even though I could only see 3 little jigsaw pieces of that animal, my brain was actually able to, work out where the elephant was, which way it was facing, the fact it was chewing. It shuffled its weight from one foot to the other, and then I saw a glimpse of tusk, a bit more of the ear, and a bit more of the tail. And even though it was probably less than the width of this room away from us, 25 meters, something like that, because I could see it, and I could see which way it was facing, and I could see it wasn't angry or whatever an elephant looks like, suddenly I actually didn't feel so threatened by it. Over the next few days, my sense of hearing came alive as well. So now I was aware of the wind through the tops of the trees. I could hear distant birds feeding on fruit up in the canopy. If a twig broke, I knew whether it was somehow my brain could work out whether it was a twig that had fallen from a tree or whether it had been trodden on, and I knew exactly where it was. And I say it was, earlier on in the school I did this thing where basically I walked around the room and I said, right, everybody just close your eyes a minute. Just close your eyes. If I clap my hands, point to where that sound came from. Yeah, there was one joker in the school that pointed the other direction. But no, you've got the idea. What is amazing that we've, as well as having stereo vision where we can actually judge distance and depth, we've got stereo hearing. And by me clapping there, that sound is traveling at how many meters per second? I don't know. Anyway, it's traveling at a certain speed of sound. And it's reaching one ear before it reaches the other. And our brains are so smart that that split-second difference between one ear and the other means you can actually triangulate, and you do it in an instant. You're not thinking, right, it hit this ear, then it hit that ear, it must be there. We all do it, and we're doing it all the time, but we're doing it unconsciously. But in the forest, I suddenly became aware of how important that was to know where things were. My sense of smell, too, came alive. So soon I was actually able to tell the difference between elephant, buffalo, leopard, snake, gorilla. All those different dungs have very distinctive flavors. And just as an animal smelling a human might be scared of it, and because of being hunted or whatever, I too was able just to tell the difference between the different animals. So it was really interesting. It was almost like somebody had given me a performance-enhancing drug. Not that I've taken one or condone that. So my life has been one of contrasts. This isn't the city of Bristol where I live, but it was a picture I got off the internet. But my life has been one of contrast, going from the city of Bristol out to the wildest of places, back to the city to reset, out to these wildest places. And that's what made me realize that this man-made world that we now live in is drowning out my senses. I'm sure it's drowning all our senses. This is a bluebell wood in England, and this is what it sounds like. I let that play right to the end. I just love the sound of it. But what we're doing is we're slowly trading our wild areas like this for scenes more like this. I mean, this is obviously an extreme example. But if you'd gone to Manhattan 500 years ago, it would have been forest. And now it looks like that. And this made me, as I say, this constant contrast of going from city to wild places, made me also think about what you actually smell in the city. I mean, today, when have you actually been aware of what you've smelt? Okay, you might have smelled French fries or a burger or a cup of coffee or maybe perfume in the lift. But other than that, your senses are kind of dead. And the other thing about being in the city is you have a sound like this. And this, to me, this is actually noise. So in the city, what you're doing, instead of actually, like the bird song, with the bird song, you're actually listening. With this, you're actually trying to block out that sound. If you were walking along the street with your friend or family or whatever, you're trying to hear each other, so your brain is having to work to, blank out all that traffic noise and all the rest of it. There we go. That's just testing me. The other thing we're doing is we're polluting the world with light. So this looks quite pretty, and we have festoon lighting and LED lights and all the rest of it. But in the city, when did you actually last look up and see the stars? When did you last look up and just gaze at the moon for half an hour? When did you actually last see the Milky Way? I mean, have you ever seen the Milky Way? The Milky Way is extraordinary. I mean, I remember when I first saw it going camping as a kid, and I slept with my head out of the tent. And I barely slept, actually. I just stared up at that sky. It's just incredible to be able to look at all those colors and things. And I know that people like the Bedouin would have navigated by that at night, traveled by night because it's cooler. But we're now drowning it out. And the other thing with these lights is we're drowning out things like this. This is fireflies in Tennessee. And this species actually communicates with light. This is a synchronous firefly, a particular species, and it flashes 5 times. So when it's flying, it'll go flash, 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 flash. And what it's doing is it's looking for a mate. Each one of these individuals, this is a 40-second exposure, but each individual is looking for a mate. And they don't dance, or they don't sing, or they don't chat. These are, flashing, saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. And unfortunately, things like this are becoming rarer and rarer, partly because of pesticides, but partly because we're drowning out their communication with our artificial light. And I think it would be a real shame if we lose all that. The last thing I want to talk about, which is sometimes a contentious issue with scientists, is the sixth sense. And you can scoff at this if you like, but I've had so many examples of the sixth sense. However you describe it or whatever you break it down, I'll just call it the sixth sense. So I just want to give you 3 examples of the sixth sense. I worked on a series called Big Cat Diary, where we followed a lion, a leopard, and a cheetah for 9 weeks. The series actually ran for 8 years. I was very fortunate on the first series to follow Half-Tail the leopard. Each day, the routine would be you'd get up in the dark, you'd get in the car by 5:30, it's still dark, you'd leave the camp, and then you're then in the car for 12 to 14 hours. So we'd go out and look for the leopard. We'd take with us, because we're out in the car all day, we'd take with us a packed breakfast and a packed lunch. And unfortunately in Kenya, that's a little white cardboard box, and in the breakfast boxes, and I'm sure you've had this, some dry white bread, hard-boiled egg, an orange juice carton, a banana, and a yogurt. And then lunch is some dry white bread, an egg, orange juice carton, a banana, and some yogurt. Anyway, just being the joker, whenever we'd stop for breakfast, I'd take out the hard-boiled egg, crack it on my head, peel it, and eat it. Lunch, crack the egg on my head, peel it, and eat it. Anyway, I did this for about 4 or 5 weeks. And then one day, we couldn't find the leopard one morning. We stopped about 9 in the shade of a tree, took the egg out of the box, I broke it on the door, and egg went everywhere. And I looked up, and Tash, the driver, and Chris, the sound recordist in the back, they said, how the bloody hell did you know that we'd put that egg in your lunchbox? So they'd been watching me every single day, and they'd obviously said, I know, let's stick a raw egg in there. I don't know how I knew to do it. Maybe there was something about the body language. It might have been some tension that I'd picked up on because they were waiting for this moment. Anyway, whatever it was, there's a picture of the egg, by the way. Whatever it was, I didn't crack it over my head. The other thing is, when I first started traveling, it was my granny, I blame her for all of this. She said, if you're going to the tropics, don't forget, shake your shoes out every morning. There could be a snake in there or a scorpion. And also, when you go to bed at night, strip your bed, it could be a snake or a scorpion. It was always a snake or a scorpion with my granny. This actually is a pair of my boots in the Congo, and it did make me think that basically if you're in a hot climate and you sweat, there's salts in your sweat, and that's what these butterflies are doing. They're coming into, God, it's pretty grim, but they're actually feeding on the salts that are in my sweat. And I did think, well, maybe there's some truth about that, about scorpions crawling in your shoe. Anyway, so for years when I went to the tropics, every morning, shake your shoes out and really look in there. Of course, for years, you never ever find a scorpion. And for years, I would strip my bed and never found a snake or a scorpion. So eventually, you give up on all that. Anyway, I was doing a shoot in Brazil and went to bed one night and I stripped the bed. And what was in there? Not the pillow, no, the thing beneath it. there was a scorpion, and I'm sure you know about scorpions. You've got a pointy bit and 2 claws. Basically, it's the pointy bit you want to avoid. And the other thing is the smaller the claws, usually the worse the sting. This one in Brazil probably would have really ruined my weekend, but wouldn't have put me in hospital. But I just, it's bizarre. How did I know that there was a scorpion in the bed? Why did I strip the bed that one night? The good thing is, in my room, I had all the things to deal with it, not the candle. Basically, a glass and an old copy of BBC Wildlife magazine. So you can scoop it under the glass, walk outside, and just as a top tip, and again, you probably know this here, take it 50 meters. Don't just chuck it out the door, because it'll be back in 10 minutes. Scorpions, generally, their range is about 10 meters, but some of them will go further than that, so take it 50 meters, and it'll be fine. You certainly don't roll the BBC Wildlife up and squash it. Just one last example of this sixth sense was, again, filming gorillas. This is actually in Belly Bai. So a bai, spelt B-A-I, is an open marshy clearing in the forest. And it's a magnet for animals. So the elephants come in and they'll bathe. They'll dig with their tusks in the loose sand in the bottom of there and eat the salts and so on. You'll get colobus, you get Red River hogs, you get all sorts of stuff. And what I was there to film was gorillas. So this is part of a study at Mbeli, which now I think has been going about 16 or 17 years. They know, or back then, they knew 140 individual gorillas that came into the Bai. I think it was something like 17 different family groups. Anyway, one day a group came in across the other side, and I was getting some nice shots of them feeding and the youngsters playing and pirouetting and God knows what else. And as I was filming, another group of gorillas came in a bit closer to us, just 200 or 300 meters to the right. And Dave and Richard, the scientists, said, quick, line up on this guy. This guy's Clive, and he does the most amazing thing. So when you get 2 groups of gorillas in the same clearing, of course there's a bit of tension. The silverbacks are like looking at each other. And what the silverback will do is basically he'll just do this posture, and he'll go all tight-lipped, and he's looking at the other family gorillas, and he's just thinking, he's basically trying to intimidate them to leave. But what Clive does, according to Dave and Richard, is that he does this extra display. So what he'll do is just suddenly, and he's the only gorilla they knew that do it, he would just splash in the water, and he'd send this huge white plume of water up 20 feet to basically say to this other gorilla, go on, piss off. Anyway, so I'm lined up. They lined up their telescopes, their spotoscopes, and I said, right, this is back in the days of film, so I couldn't just run like a video camera. I had like 200 feet of film left, 5 minutes. So I lined it up, I was on the 600 mil, and I said, right, if you see any sign that Clive's going to do this, just tell me and I'll run the camera. So we watched and watched and watched. We watched for 20 minutes. I ran the camera and Clive went like this, did this amazing splash, and I got the shot. And Dave and Richard, they turned around to me and they said, how do you know to run the camera? And I said, I didn't. I mean, I just pushed the button and got it. And a scientist might say, well, okay, how many times have you run the camera and not got a shot, so scientifically? Or how many times actually have you slept in a bed with a scorpion, it just never stung you? But to me, I mean, I could bore you all night, probably all tomorrow as well. So I've had so many examples that are beyond scientific, beyond probability. So although we can create amazing cities, we've got all the distractions of things like architecture, art, displays, shows. For me, these are just distractions from the natural world that we evolved to live in. And I think we're losing touch with the natural world. Collectively as humans, we're fast displacing every other species on this planet, and we're destroying the planet. We're supposedly the most intelligent animal on this planet, and yet we are knowingly soaring through the very branch we're sitting on. And I'd just like you all to think about that, really. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much,
Sorry
Gavin.
to talk to the back of your head. But,
no problems. No problems at all. No problems. So, wow, that kind of brings us to the end of our session. I had a lot of questions, but you actually answered all of them when you're.
Well, the only thing I'd like to add is, I mean, I resonate with everything you've said. I resonate with the walking. I resonate with what you were saying about being in tune. You had to actually be in tune to hunt. I'm hunting with a different thing. I'm hunting with a camera, but I know exactly what you mean. You have to be kind of in that zone, and it takes time to do it. For me, it took 3 or 4 days for my senses just to, I mean, I wasn't trying to waken them up. They just woken up out of necessity. And I think if I took any one of you to the Congo, you'd go through the same range of emotions. You'd be shit scared for a few days. But that sense of self-preservation, I think your senses would come alive. And I think here they're drowned.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to all of you guys. That's the end of our session. But before you head off to the book signing, which you must do, these books are amazing, I mean, fantastic. And by the way, Ali gave us maybe a preview of a future book that you're going to write and you're going to come launch at the festival in the next few years. In the next year. You got a year to write a book, basically. So Ali's got a couple of books, and it's about life in the UAE. But we want you to write the book about...
I felt like I didn't say anything, that I'm here because I actually have a book, but sorry, I was not focusing on it. But my book is there. It's called The Answers by Ask Ali. So I have it here.
But we want the book about all these other countries, so the Durud book that's coming up. The book signing will take place in the lobby. I would just like to thank all of you for being here. I'd like to thank the AV team, the volunteers, our title sponsor, Emirates Airline, our founding partner, Dubai Culture, our parent organization, Emirates Literature Foundation, our session sponsors, and they are Dubai Tourism, Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Knowledge Foundation, Dubai Airports, and of course to all of our amazing speakers who have now there's like 1 degree of separation between me and everybody in the world and everything in the world. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Round of applause, guys.